Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a belated Fake Accents Unite. We've had a week off, but we are back in full strength now. I'm joined, as always, by the Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. I wonder how many million seconds it is now.
Oh, I'm sure he'll let us know how late we are. I'm also joined this evening. We've got a panel of the ladies this evening. We're joined by Poe the Person and Based Elizabeth. Although you go by Dragon Liz now, I think it is. I keep getting told off for calling you the wrong name.
No, I'm probably still going to stay with Based Liz for now.
Okay, so there we go. And yes, and Poe the Person, who I glossed over a little bit there. Welcome.
Hi, yeah. It's great to be back on with the British. It's been ages since I talked to you, and Base Liz as well. Actually, I don't know, Liz, if you saw the week that was yesterday, I think the British has picked up the perfect new name for you, which is simply Elizabeth with an S.
That's true. I could go with that.
I know that
I did see it.
Elizabeth with an S. Okay.
Well, the Twitter, your Twitter, on Twitter, it's Elizabeth, but Based Elizabeth with an S, isn't it?
Yes, Elizabeth with a Z and Based Liz were both taken.
Yeah, so that's why I pointed out, when I mentioned you, I made sure to mention that it was Elizabeth with an S so that one could find you.
It was a bit surprising because I usually listen to your stream. I don't usually watch the video. I have it playing often if I'm doing something else. And I think I was baking and just listening, and then you said, and Based Elizabeth. I'm like, wait, what? Huh?
I don't think I've ever
It just caught me off guard.
Grief. Well, welcome to everyone on the panel. That's the main thing I want to say. How are we all feeling? I hope we're ready to delve into the kind of slightly wacky world of the news and popular culture, as we always do.
I would, of course, also meanwhile ask the chat to inform Poe the Person as to why viruses and the online medium bring someone like myself to refer to gingham dresses.
Say again.
So this is the challenge for the chat.
Okay.
Because in pre-stream, I mentioned gingham dresses because someone at Poe the Person's is coughing, and I said, well, as long as I don't end up in a gingham dress, which completely befuddled Poe.
Indeed.
So this is the challenge for the chat, to educate Poe as to why there is reference to gingham dresses.
What happens in pre-stream stays in pre-stream. I thought that was the...
Just because that might be an unspoken rule on other streams does not mean it's the case here. Most often we get complained at by the chat for then sharing something we said it on pre-stream, which we should have said on stream. I'm just trying to... Oh, yes, if it helps the chat, Mr. Flibble is another reference with the gingham dress. Yes, the Red Dwarf crew are coming out. We did do a Red Dwarf stream, didn't we?
We did once, yes. Radlib was on, if I remember rightly.
Seems long and long ago. Apparently, you and I are too quiet, Poe, but I'm going to mess around with the settings myself. And Liz and the British are too loud, so I shall try and equalise things a little bit.
I'll try and shout louder.
No, that's perfectly all right by us, isn't it, Liz?
Hopefully. Hopefully it all
keep the serfs down.
Yes, indeed.
So whose stream do you think this is, man? Ridiculous. Right, there we go. We've all been altered, surgically or otherwise, now to be the appropriate volume. So I hope that it's all fine.
All I can say is I'm being suppressed yet again on YouTube.
You'll find I brought us all up to be in line with you, Britisher, as opposed to dragging away. This is not a communist socialist state, after all.
Some of us are more equal than others, are they?
But yes, obviously the last couple of weeks have been fairly hectic with regards to both the coup, the US election has been rearing its head. We've got shenanigans, for lack of a better term, going on across the channel in France because of this whole thing with the beheading of a teacher. And we've also got Douglas Murray had a fun chat with the Swiss. That was quite entertaining, if any of you caught that. And yeah,
That was ages ago, wasn't it?
Ages ago. Well, it was 6 days, but
If it's the one I'm talking about that you were tweeting about earlier, that chat happened at least 2 weeks ago, I think.
Okay, well, maybe it happened 2 weeks ago, Poe. Just tear me down in front of my sincerity in front of the fans. Ridiculous.
What's it called when a woman corrects you? Is there like a man-interrupting word for that? I think we talked about
no, because we literally don't care. You don't get a special word. Like, why would we make you feel special?
Just to be clear, we were talking about the sort of debate that wasn't a debate with the Flavia somebody.
Oh yes, the young Swiss woman who was a political activist, now retired, for lack of a better, have been going for about 8 years, fighting the populist right in Switzerland, and basically saying how they. How she had really taken a fight to them, but now she's handed the organisation on. Then she called Douglas Murray not only stupid but a fool, a xenophobe, and said that he basically just was someone who was a right-wing populist and hated anyone who wasn't him. So it was he didn't take very kindly to that within the first 5 minutes of the discussion, as it were.
I was more insulted by the fact that she didn't make any actual points. It was just a series of ad hominems and just sort of random sort of rambling. It was really quite remarkable.
As an academic agent might say, it was the embodiment of John Lennon's Imagine. It was a set of statements and platitudes and expectations, but not never backed up with any facts. So, for instance, she was saying things like, the European identity is predicated on all these different liberal values and that sort of thing. But unlike what you're used to when you're dealing with both, political figures, historians, and that sort of thing, is they will reference where that liberal tradition has come from. And if it's something more modern, from the last 20 to 50 years, you would expect for her to be able to, list off these different mandates which made this thing, why it was popular with the people, why that was something which defined Europeans within a shared European identity. That was one irritating thing as well when the moderator said that basically the Switzerland wasn't European because it wasn't within the EU, and that was just a little thing which irked me, because I was like, the EU does not have the monopoly on the European identity, as it were, as you say. But yes, that was just a horrendous thing, and it was funny to watch Douglas switch from good faith debater to himself just putting the absolute smackdown on this person and saying things like, people who haven't contributed anything worthwhile to all of human endeavour, people like Flavia. It was just pure savagery. I loved it. Oh yes, we've got the coin to talk about today as well.
All I can say, of course, is that the Swiss are suspiciously close to the Austrians.
Geographically.
So it's almost like you only have one reference to make, and you have to make it every stream. No, marvellous, Bridget. No, I don't know about that. I mean, the Swiss are just it's a tax haven. That's why it's still around, isn't it? That's the main thing.
Eating chocolate.
Yeah, although they quite heavily tax their population. They've got quite strong VAT, from what I understand it. Where am I?
Well, they also had a rather good jump-off period after the war, didn't they?
Yeah, but that was mainly due to hoarding all that gold, wasn't it?
Yes, precisely. But what I mean is, if you basically start the post-war period with a huge amount of capital that you have acquired, let's say, by questionable means, it puts you in a good starting position, given that the rest of the European continent is in complete ruins.
Yeah, I'd say the Keynesians would have us believe that being in a war and having a government spending lots of money was really good for the various economies. And
no, I don't think the Keynesians would necessarily claim that having your own infrastructure bombed to smithereens is a particularly good thing.
I'm not saying it was a net positive, but that's I don't know, it's just one thing to consider. How did we get onto this anyway?
I started ranting about the Swiss. I think that's how we got onto it. I think the Swiss got away with it because the Brits and the French basically required access to the Swiss money markets, because obviously they were already a banking haven then. Whereas I believe the Americans wanted to basically completely kibosh them, because they were completely aware of the fact that they had been collaborators. So yes, it's always a bit of a strange one when one talks of the sort of how well the Swiss economy is doing and whatever, because you always feel, well, hang on a moment, didn't they have a bit of a running start compared to everybody else?
Don't know what you're talking about, Britisher. I, for one, welcome our new Swiss overlords.
Yes.
They're going to be our new best friends after Brexit, right?
Well, there are many places which will be our friends. I mean, we've already, Brexit has taken such a kind of backseat in the coronavirus times, right? But Boris is still pushing through various bits and pieces. Again, they've cucked again. It's very frustrating. Although the Europeans, it seems, appear to be the ones to have finally taken the harder line stance, right? So we've reached the cut-off date for when a deal was supposed to have been arranged. Boris and the Conservative government have basically said they want too much access to our fishing waters, and there's still unresolved stuff around Northern Ireland. So we don't want. We're not going forward with that. They can come to us with a better deal. The Europeans turned around and said, "We're not making any further moves. The Brits are going to have to make all the concessions from now on," which is kind of not really a change on their stance. And then Britain said, "Well, we're open to discussing further terms beyond the deal cut-off date." To which the Europeans have said, no, basically, which is interesting. I think they're as tired of this as we are, potentially, or it could just be that the bureaucrats are playing some sort of 4D chess, but if there's a greater plan here from the European side, the EU side, I should say, I can't see it. Any thoughts from the panel?
I had a thought.
I was just going to say,
Sorry, Liz first.
Go on.
I wonder whether the EU may be considering waiting until after the US elections, because we know that Trump will happily support Brexit and will stand behind the UK, and Biden will not. He will tell them, no, forget it, the US will side with the EU.
Mm-hmm. That is an interesting point. It's just a week for them, after all, to really sort of know at least the way the wind is blowing, right? And if
it'll be 2 more weeks.
Two more weeks. I thought the election was taking place on the 22nd. Is it not 22nd?
The US election? It's November 3rd.
Okay. Well, I don't know where I had that coming from in my own mind. But, okay. Good to know, because I have a stream
2 weeks from tomorrow.
I have a stream lined up for the 25th, and I was thinking I might be discussing the US election. But that's good. That's good that I won't be doing that. And it also means I can reschedule, when I go through... because I'll probably be following it live. I might do a stream through the night. Usually I sit on Uzalu's stream and do it with him, but we'll see what happens in terms of multi-streaming. I'm
sure there will be a lot of streams going on.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, it's not something that I'm doing for profit. It's because it's fun, right? And I like going through everything and seeing the way it's going to turn out. So, yes. So the EU might be holding off until the wind is shown to be which way it's blowing with regards to the US. Some things to point out. We do have a trade deal already sorted with Australia, with Japan, and there's one more country, and it's escaping me right now. Do you know offhand, Britisher?
Wasn't there one with Switzerland and possibly with Norway?
I know they're in the works, but I don't know if they're finalised. So, but I know that certainly the stuff in the Far East, for lack of a better term, is sorted. So it's not like we're completely adrift from this. We just all have to get used to barbecues and sushi. That's that's what I'm getting at. A couple of super chats have come in, I assume related to these sorts of things. We have Hagnar the Viking being very generous as usual, saying, Arve Britisher, noble women Liz and Lord Protector Mark, and whoever this Poe person is. I trust you are all keeping an eye out for Germans because we all know Germania delenda est. Thank you, Hagnar. When it comes to the Swiss, he also says, Swiss are Germans, they are not, therefore not Europeans, just riffraff that managed to hole up in the mountains. So imagine, like, the dwarven race is real, it's the Swiss. Yes, there's that. A couple more, I don't know why these aren't registering in the viewer activity, but, yeah. Hades XY says, we simply hold the coat and took the one. We have a Swiss person. I've just called them dwarves. Thank you, Hades. We simply hold the coat and took the wallets out while the others got at it during the war. I think he's referring to there. So,
that could well be a sort of the theme of it. Yes, albeit I don't think they really necessarily needed to sort of get the wallets out of coats that were handed to him. I think the Germans pretty specifically just sent them the valuables.
In little boxes, yes. Hagnar weighing in again. First issue there. Never trust a German with your wallets. I think the Swiss would probably take issue with being called Germans. Don't know about that. Which is why I suppose the Germans are sending the wallets away. And then saying, you wouldn't need to have this much of an issue with the EU if Germany just happened to be washed off the map. You know, I'm starting to get the sense that Hagnar doesn't really like Germany that much. I am curious, no need to super chat in, but whether or not we have any Germans in the chat who follow this stream. If so, say hi. That would be interesting.
What is, of course, interesting is that Hagnar the Viking does sound somewhat Germanic.
Gonna piss off the Scandinavians, man. That's what's gonna happen. And last but not least, Hagnar saying, that's cute if you think Biden is making any deals, it will be his vice president. So what do you make of this, Liz, in particular? Because you're obviously the resident American on the panel. What do you make of Biden? If Biden wins, then effectively he has to step down within a year just due to ailing health, and we have Kamala Harris as the new president, effectively, for the rest of the term. What do you make of her?
I doubt that they will do that if they don't have to. I think that they will keep him in place as long as possible, as really just as a figurehead. They will not admit that he's not doing anything, but he won't actually be doing anything. I think that they're preparing in case they do need to take him out. The panel they're trying to set up regarding the, oh dear, I can't remember. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here. But the Congress is currently trying to set up a system in place where they could remove him even if the Republicans win the House and the Congress. Win the House and the Senate. Because if the Republicans do, as things stand now, they probably would not remove Biden. They would leave him in place. Yeah, the 25th Amendment panel. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chat.
Right. Not that familiar with that one. Can you explain how that works?
The 25th Amendment allows for the president to be removed from his position as president, and if he's deemed incapacitated. Mm-hmm. It requires the vice president stepping forward and saying he's not able to perform his functions, he needs to be removed, and then the Congress, I believe it is, has to vote on it and say, yes, we'll remove him. The problem is, as some people are saying, if the Republicans win the Congress, they won't allow that. They will say, no, you voted him in, you're stuck with him, he's staying here. So the Democrats currently have the Congress. So what they're in theory doing is setting up a panel with people that they will most likely put on the panel, and they will say this panel is good for this many years. And then if the president during this time is deemed to be unfit and the vice president says, I want him removed, then the panel will decide whether or not to remove him. So then even if the Republicans take the House, this panel will still be the ones in charge and they can actually remove him. Right. So that's the theory for why they're setting up the panel. Originally, when they were first saying, oh, we're going to be setting this up, people were saying, oh, they're doing this to remove Trump. Well, they can't remove Trump because Pence is not going to be on their side, and the vice president has to be the one to start the process. Rolling, yeah. Right. And so Pelosi was saying, no, we're not doing this for Trump. We're doing this in case we need it in the future.
How do you feel about like Trump's chances? I assume that you are supporting Trump in as much as you could support Trump this time around.
Yes, I am voting him. I did not vote for him last time. I do plan to vote for him this time. And I think his chances are very good if we don't have a lot of cheating. If there's a lot of fraud, he could lose. But short of that, I would think he's definitely going to win.
Yeah, I mean, they're comparing the mail-in votes this year versus 4 years ago. And they're saying for this time last election, there was something like 1.3... no, I don't know if this seems very small. I think I'm thinking of a specific state, but it's like 1.3 million votes, and then compared to this time where it's something like 5.8 million votes. So it's like this massive increase, and that's being seen, from state to state.
Yes.
I think also hasn't, if I'm remembering correctly, the rhetoric between Trump and Biden has been Biden urging mail in, and Trump saying vote in person, vote in person, vote in person. So are we expecting to see the swing towards Biden? Because the polls just seem to be horrendously, out of touch with what I'm seeing on social media in terms of the engagement.
Yes, the issue with mail-in voting is we are seeing so many ballots being thrown out, and the people who run the elections in the states, they get to choose whether to keep a ballot or throw it out. And the issue a lot of people are saying is they can look at the return address. They can look at where the person is sending the ballot from and know whether this is a red area or a blue area. If you look at the state of Florida, where I am, we have so many different counties. There are only a few counties that vote Democrat, generally speaking. Most counties in Florida vote Republican. However, those counties are less populous. You have most of the people in the Democrat counties, which is why Florida is still a swing state. Even though you have fewer spaces, you have close to the same number of people voting either way in general. Mm-hmm. So in theory, you could have the election, the people doing the elections could, again, in theory, be throwing out ballots from areas that they don't like or that they think may likely go to one way or the other. So that's the potential for fraud. That's one of the potentials.
I have seen another thing, which is that, I don't know, they're calling them 4chan hackers, but that generally seems to be the stated, what the go-to is.
The hacker known as 4chan.
The hacker known as 4chan, who managed to change the voting preference of the mayor of Portland to Trump, which is what I saw this morning, exploiting a weakness in their online system. Again, just highlighting the potential for fraud there, as well as the fact that when they put in the name of the person that they wanted to basically put a fraudulent vote in for, it gave them all of his personal information, including phone number and address. So it seems to be fraught with difficulties. I don't know how many people would take advantage of it, but the question is really, how many people do you need to take advantage of it for it to have a significant... to basically just corrupt the whole election? Because I know that there's an allowance for something like... over here, there's an allowance for something like up to 3% of the vote to be basically fraudulent with regards to mail-ins. That's specific to mail-ins, that's not the overall vote, it's just like 3% of mail-in ballots. Or
yes.
Postal votes, as we call them. So I don't know what the tolerance is in America for that sort of thing, basically.
There could be a lot of fraud. There could be people just, we've seen it, people collecting ballots. If you've seen the Project Veritas videos, people just collecting mail-in ballots and then filling them out themselves and sending them in on behalf of the people to whom they were sent. In theory, those should be rejected because the signature on the ballot, the signature on the envelope, should not match the signature on the voter roll. But then you have states saying, ignore the signatures, just accept the ballot, or not necessarily accept the ballot, but if the signature doesn't match, send it back to the voter so that they can fix the signature and resubmit it. There's a lot of potential for fraud. Now, as far as some one group overarching, trying to do fraud on a massive scale across the entire nation, that would be very difficult, if not impossible, because each county does voting in their area, and even each area, it's like, I live in one town and we have voting stations all over this town, and each station collects the votes and then brings it to, I think, the county office. The county office then tallies the votes, sends it to the state tallies the votes, and then that's how the electors for the Electoral College are selected. So the US election is so spread out, it would be impossible to hack from the top. You would have to hack a number of key areas all over the US. That is possible. To just, people are saying you just need to flip the right places. Yes, you just need to go to certain swing states, find certain key counties, and hack it there. So it would not be, it wouldn't have to be fraud on a massive scale. It would just have to be, I mean, it would be massive, but it would be in very specific places. And that's the issue.
Mm-hmm. I don't have much to add here, but I was just pondering how outdated the system of having a signature as like your own personal secret password is. It kind of strikes me as it's the kind of archaic version of the capture "I'm not a robot" test. Like
the signature is only necessary if you're doing mail-in voting. Yeah. I never do mail-in voting. So when I walk into the voting poll or the voting station, I just show my photo ID, and I do sign it. I mean, they'll put the paper down, and then I sign it to say that I voted. But the verification in that case is my photo ID. It's not my signature. The signature is used if you're doing a mail-in ballot, because they have to have some way of verifying that the person sending in the ballot is the actual voter.
Yeah, I think it's remarkably. It seems to work quite well, because although it's quite easy to forge one person's signature, it's not something you can do en masse in that way that you were describing. You can't forge hundreds of signatures instantly. Although they don't it, of course.
Actually, if you know how to do it, you could. Because I've actually thought about that, and I think part of it's working as a bookkeeper. I know a lot of things that I don't need to know, and I could get a lot of signatures. I know where to find signatures of people that they probably don't even realize are public record.
Well, I guess it would make it take longer anyway. It's another step in the process.
That's the other big question. I'm assuming you don't have anything to jump in on here, Britcher, unless there's something specific.
Not much. I'm not really an expert on potential voter fraud in American elections.
It's very disappointing, given you were raised over there. But
of course, that's no doubt tell from my accent. Yeehaw!
Oh, stop it, you. But yes, this is the other thing. When are we going to have the results? Because of course the fear is that, I don't know, we'll have a Trump quote unquote landslide on November 3rd, and then 2 weeks later it'll turn out that it's actually a very, very, very close race for whatever reason, legitimate or otherwise, and Biden might end up edging it. And what happens at that point? It's what are you expecting to see happen?
If it's a landslide, people will at least. Okay, if it's a landslide, I think we can call it the night of. If it's not a landslide, that's where it's going to be an issue, because that's when you have to wait for the mail-in ballots. But if it is a full-on landslide, if Trump just wins hands down, just 58 states and just no question, overwhelming majority of the popular vote, there's no way in that case that the Republicans would accept mail-in ballots on the scale that would be needed to flip it.
Right. Okay. A couple of super chats. EC90 says, I'll save your other one, EC90, the first one that you made, for a little bit later. But says, it was Kamala with the pillow in the bedroom. It's a Clue reference, or Cluedo for us. Hagnar asked the Britisher, how much for you to forget his super chat limit?
There'll be no forgetting the super chat limit.
There'll be no forgetting the super chat limit. And finally says, Antifa is just a very German idea. I'm just saying. Also, land-owning 35-year-old men was a good system. Getting rid of it just allowed Dems the power of Gibbs. Land-owning 35-year-old men Was it
Voting.
It used to be.
About voting.
Sorry, say again.
He's saying that used to be the standard that you had to meet to be able to vote.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. No, my brain was in a completely different place there. Yeah. Raise the voting age. I agree.
Too many people wanting to get rid of the universal suffrage, and
What
somehow thinking that this will, this will turn the clock back and whatever. I really think that those folks are living in complete cloud cuckoo land.
Well, I look at
ever more and more desperate attempts to somehow try and undo democracy as we understand it.
Well, I go back to it and I look at it and I'm like, right, well, the whole point of citizenship is, sorry. There's like this whole thing with voting. It's like voting always used to have a cost, apart from the ladies when they got it last. So it was something which you had to not necessarily earn but pay a cost in order to have access to. So in that sense, I agree that universal suffrage was a mistake. However, I do look at it now and go, if we took away universal suffrage and handed it to effectively the liberal elites, neoliberal elites really, who currently control all the businesses and are the landowners, I don't think that we're going to end up with a better result at the end of it by effectively cutting out large swathes of the working class in a renter's market where no one can afford to move into it.
There is something worth pointing out with all these people who will sort of try and make out that, oh, well, giving the women the vote was a mistake. It should have stayed with, what was it, 30-year-old landowning men. And then you take those very same people, and you say, so who's your favourite Prime Minister? Margaret Thatcher!
I wouldn't have an
think
issue...
about it.
Sorry, go on.
If you think about it, having the vote only 35-year-old landowning men made sense before we had income tax. But now everybody is paying into the system if they're working. So it doesn't make sense to say you have to own property. I would say if you are paying taxes, you have the right to vote.
I'd also agree with that. If I can be exempt from income tax, I'd gladly give up the vote. That's what I always say when people try to take my vote away.
Well, but there are plenty other ways of paying tax other than income tax.
Yes, and I'm saying if you exempt me from all taxes, you can have my vote.
I'm saying...
Funny, in a way, isn't it, sort of hearing this from an American, the ones who are basically, oh, well, we want to vote, we're asked to pay tax. And now it's sort of, no, I don't want to vote at all, just don't tax me.
The Americans said the same thing. No taxation without representation. If you hadn't been taxing us, we wouldn't have left.
I don't have a problem with raising the voting age over here to 26, seeing as that's the average age at which most young adults leave their parents' homes now. So
that's your age.
I would point out regarding this whole American Revolution thing that one of the main reason, it wasn't one of the reasons, the main reason we really needed to tax you is because of the sheer amount it costs in order to protect you from, guess who? The French. And who did you ask for help? Who did you ask for help when it came to try to get rid of us? The French. I rest my case.
So what you're saying is we can lay all of the blame for all taxation throughout all history at the feet of the French.
Well, I mean, income tax was introduced over here in order to fight the French. The taxation that led to all the trouble, the taxation that led to all the trouble with the Americans was really due to the French.
Yes, but you're saying, oh, we had to tax you to get money to defend you, and you forget the fact that you were trying to take our guns away so we couldn't defend ourselves.
We had the guns. You didn't need them whilst we had them.
We're all friends now.
Didn't need them. Why are you so uppity about
this? Well, I believe one started trying to take your guns away once you got it into your head that you might start shooting at us.
Yes.
Oh, I think we started shooting when you tried to take the guns.
No.
We're looking at a classic case of cause and effect and which way it runs. That's what it's got. Which factor caused the other? Oh,
moral of the story, do not try to take guns away from Americans.
Yeah, there is a certain fetish there, isn't there?
Yes, I would say so.
Well earned. Have you done much shooting, Britisher?
I have in the past, done a little shooting. I wasn't any good at it.
That doesn't surprise me at all. Total wet. No, it's no. I love shooting. It was great. That's I deeply regret the fact that I can't partake of it in London. Although give it time, and I may be able to take part impromptu in the streets. That's a joke.
You see yourself as the street warrior of the upcoming anti-revolutionary forces, do you?
I don't, but I might snipe from a tower. I see that the chat is saying you were shooting your blunderbuss, naturally, Britisher.
Oh yes, very much so.
Was it a flintlock pistols? Was it?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want to give the game away, but I think it was more one that you had to crank up rather than the flintlock version.
Back in the box.
I love the idea of the that scene from Blackadder the Third, where they're having the cannon fights between Rowan Atkinson and Stephen Fry, the characters that they're playing, just having a cannon, and he has the silver. Was it the silver cigar case that he's got in his pocket, which saved him from being shot? Yeah.
Fry's the only character in that show that I can remember the name of. It was called Darling, of course.
Well,
that's Hugh Laurie. He was always saying Darling because that was Hugh Laurie's name.
What? No, it
wasn't Hugh Laurie's
that was
name.
Tim. Tim something or other. I can't remember his. Who played Darling? Chat, help us out. Who played Captain Darling in Blackadder His Fourth? That's what I need to know.
I was trying to get back my English comedy head.
Mind you, the silver cigarette case just reminded me of something, of a film I just saw recently. 1917. I got to see it on Amazon.
Oh, you did watch it? What did you make of it?
Very, very good film. Very good film. But, yes, there was one moment which sort of, with hindsight, I look back at and go, hang on a moment, what actually happened there?
Go on.
Well, there is that moment where he has to cross that canal and he's sort of balancing over the bridge that is actually down in the water.
Yes, the piping, yes.
And then there is, he comes on the fire and he makes it to the other side and he starts shooting back at the window whence the shooting is coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then he makes it into the building and then he opens the door and then he shoots and the wounded German also shoots. And the next thing he knows, he gets flung back and he ends up at the sort of bottom of some of the steps and he's cracked his head open from falling backwards.
Yeah.
But if he got flung backwards by the German shooting at him, we never had an explanation as to why he didn't actually have a hole in him.
It grazed the side of his head, that's why. So it just goes above his ear. And but the force of it will knock you off your feet. Yes.
I didn't get the grazed the side of his head bit at all.
Well, I don't know what to say, Richard, except you need to watch it again.
One question I have got regarding the actor.
Yeah.
Is he related by any chance to the chap who played the Centurion in the series Rome?
I have no idea, as I have not.
Because there is this, but perhaps anybody in the chat who knows both, 1917 and that series. Vorenus, isn't it? That I believe is what the character is called in the series Rome. There seems to be a very strong likeness. To my mind, from what I can tell at least, I would not at all be surprised that those two were related.
Well, I don't know. So it's up to the chat to prove you correct or otherwise. One thing you will notice with 1917, the entire film is shot as one continuous shot. Did you notice that?
Well, not really. It's taken in a series as long shots, but it's not really one continuous shot.
Apart from one cut, which is the moment when he gets knocked unconscious, and the I believe one other time when he's catching the convoy, it's all one continuous shot. That was the whole point. There was a big deal made of that, anyway.
Oh no, I have heard the same deal made of it, but watching it, no, that there are self-evident sort of tricks where they build in a cut. They just hide it very cleverly.
Oh, I have no doubt. They didn't do it all in one take, after all. But yes, that's it. Anyway, 1917, totally worth
But,
your time. Apart from the
very well worth watching. Yes.
Apart from the only thing which jars me about it, as usual, is apart from they get the scale wrong. Although I appreciate it's difficult to do that with such films. The scale was far too small, but also the use of token minorities was also
yes. I
telling.
definitely noticed that. Yes,
Like,
you sort of think, well, there's an Indian in the lorry with them, and you just go, shouldn't he be part of an Indian unit?
Yes, there was.
Why is there the lone Indian with the other chaps? And then when they're there, when eventually he catches up with the Devons, and then there are one or two black soldiers.
It's just this random black soldier lying on the very white chalk. Yes.
Why are they black soldiers among the Devons in 1917? That doesn't make any sense.
Well, you know why? It's that now to be eligible for an Academy Award, you need to have a certain amount of diversity.
Well, I mean, that didn't even apply at the time when this film came out. But
just making a joke.
Clearly one wanted the diversity in there in order to show that one was, a pucker pro-diversity person and not a total racist.
Yeah, I understand that the arrow of causality was not the actual reason, but I'm just saying get used to it.
I suppose we should be thankful that Benedict Cumberbatch's commanding officer role was not fulfilled by a woman at the same time. So there's that.
Well, I mean, if they make a remake, there's always a role in there for Meghan Markle.
1917 2.0, isn't that? Yes. All right. 1918. Let's move on, but also slightly back a bit again. So we're going back to the sort of the Brexit deal thing. EC90 has said Boris and Gove want to implement all the EU regulations and more that importers currently face and make them pay for it, no deal or not. Food prices will be going up if businesses don't take the cost. So I'll say that again. Boris and Gove want to implement all of the EU regulations and more that importers currently face as we're part of the EU and make them pay for it, no deal or not. So food prices will be going up if businesses don't take the cost. I don't know necessarily whether or not I agree with that statement in its entirety. It depends on the degree to which we are... The amount of access to the European markets that we will have, and also the amount of access to and the amount of leverage, that the US will place on the UK to accept certain drops in food standards, which personally I don't think most of the British population would be very happy with, but because the British population is so passive, I don't know whether or not, they've put up enough resistance where it doesn't just become normalised within 5 years anyway. Thoughts from the panel?
You can always pay more to get higher standards. If the customers want it, then there'll be a profit to be made from selling.
The issue isn't going to be from people who are shopping at Waitrose, right? They're always going to have the same types of stuff. The issue is going to be in public institutions, in education, for instance, school meals. It's going to be in, what businesses offer in their cafeterias. And it's going to be in things which basically you have no say personally over the quality of for yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. I don't know if that's the majority of food purchases. It could be. When you word it like that, I think there probably is more consumer decisions being made on a household level, probably outnumber the cafeteria food that you're talking about.
Oh, I expect so. But it's talking about, things like the next generation of kids. It's also how it might be disguised. I appreciate that a lot of it's just some semantics, but I don't want certain food quality standards. The question is not whether or not it's going to be a positive or a negative, but whether or not it will happen, basically. Whether or not there will be a change effectively in the legislation, either because of government elitist decree or whether or not and how much resistance the British public has or doesn't have towards these sorts of things. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm still a bit confused regarding the initial statement here, which is that Gove and Boris want these regulations.
So it's much easier for them not to have to change the way that the system is set out itself at the moment, and so they'll impose the tariffs that they currently impose and the standards that they currently impose on imports, in order to basically make things easier for themselves, and so that they can kind of milk the tariff money from that, is what they're saying.
Well, so basically, that the UK would voluntarily continue the tariff situation as opposed to agreeing to an obligation for a tariff situation.
Well, it might do that, especially if it
But
believes...
this is exactly what I can't see them doing.
Especially if they... The statement is saying that, and I believe the rationale is especially if they believe that the EU's tariffs, imports and standards and whatnot is only going to get worse. And so with it, even if they look the same at the moment, in 10 years' time, they might look, much considerably better than what the EU is currently offering to outsiders.
I mean, I have my doubts that Britain will kind of continue to just keep the sort of tariff system going as is, especially because it would mean, a barrier to all these trade deals they want to strike.
No, so they claim it. Most of the trade deals are already struck. So it's just a case of, like, as I say, the elephant in the room is America. So we don't know what's going to happen with America. We won't know what's going to happen until both the election is through and talks kind of resume in earnest. I don't think Biden and the Democrats have shown that they're very anti, sort of not anti-collaboration with the UK, but certainly not as enthused by it. They're much more, enthused by the EU position than Trump is, whereas Trump is the opposite. So he's very enthused by us, quote, going our own way, what some people call us becoming the 52nd state of America, and other things. So
I can't see that happening.
I can't see it happening either. But, I'm just parroting what someone like Owen Jones might say, selling our soul to the devil that is Trump's America and that sort of thing.
What was it, about a year ago, they were always going on about how Boris was trying to sell the NHS, or was it Theresa May back then? It was, they're putting the NHS on the trading block, and I'm
really... And speaking of the NHS, because I'm really irritated, my dad is waiting for surgery at the moment. He currently has had a craniectomy, so he's got a great big hole in his skull. His brain is exposed, and he's been that way for the past year, pretty much. They've just they needed to relieve the pressure on his skull. He had a stroke, etc., and initially they put a plate into his head to cover up the gap. It had an infection, it had to come out again, and we've been waiting, and it's been basically about 6 months since then, just waiting for this second operation. And then they've told him, well, you need to isolate yourself for 2 weeks. He's done that. And then they said, your operation will be on this day, wait for our call about a bed. That call never came. When we finally chased it up, they said it's not happening till tomorrow morning, checked till tomorrow morning, went to then. Nothing happened then. Now they're looking at potentially on Thursday, and all this time my parents have to self-isolate. My dad has to starve himself because he's not allowed to have had food 24 hours, and it's a lot of stress and that sort of thing. And I'm going, has someone who has been dealt with in the private system for that, I'm looking at our NHS and going, this is a time where we have record low hospital admissions because of the whole coronavirus thing, and we're not able to find space for someone who needs a critical care operation. He needs to have this done because the longer his head cycle is, the worse it gets. And they won't do it. And I'm becoming more and more anti-NHS. I have a lot of sympathy for NHS workers in the majority of cases, apart from the TikTok dance nurses. But the NHS as a whole, the more I'm seeing of it, the more I'm realizing how little it works. And I'm not advocating for an insurance-based American system, because I don't think that works either. But I am advocating for just like any private alternative to be, cost effective and that sort of thing, and become the norm, because it seems so much more reliable. Goodness sake. Sorry, that's my rant there.
And insurance, if you introduce private insurance over there, it would work a lot better than it does here, because you wouldn't have all the regulations we have here.
We have private insurance over here.
instead of the NHS.
You can take it. The trouble is that the systems are meshed. So it's like my dad's private insurance has lapsed because he's been out of work so long, and he's going into the NHS care now, which is that. But every time a private patient comes in to use the NHS facilities, they bump the public option to the back of the queue. Well, what I'm talking about is like fully fleshed, kind of more private hospitals and that sort of thing, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the way I sum up the anti-NHS argument is that you make something a right or whatever. You say everybody gets healthcare, but there's no definition of what the quality of the healthcare is or when you get it, because it's free and you have no sort of say in the matter. It really, getting an operation today is not the same as getting it in a year. But people who say, an operation is an operation, it should be free, you shouldn't have to pay for it. There's no appreciation of that fact, I think. Your tragic predicament, your father, I'm really sorry for your father. I hope he recovers soon and gets his operation, but it's sadly pretty typical for the system.
Yes, anyway, the NHS is an enormous topic. And something I would like to research a great deal more before we go too far diving into it. Lots of people saying most people can't afford private medical insurance and that sort of thing. And it's like, there's huge issues. I'm making generalised statements, and I need to. If we're gonna have an NHS stream, we'll have an NHS stream. That's what I'm.
Let's do it.
But there's. Who was saying what? Let me see here. So that was EC90 on the Brexit thing about standard slipping and whatnot. Let me see.
Just while you're looking, I was going to mention earlier that all this Brexit news has been really pushed down just on the using the BBC front page as a kind of litmus test for the media. You have to go past the top two kind of rows of news that has a thumbnail or a little graphic, and then the first news story about the EU or Brexit is just a little headline that you can click on. You have to scroll down to see. It's really not up front and center.
Out of curiosity, does Trump rank higher than Brexit?
Yes, the election and coronavirus, and then just some random little stories.
To be fair, when it comes to Brexit, basically nothing's happening. We do get a story every so often, and these things which would have been key dates and no doubt top of the lineup, if none of this other stuff was going on. But I think even without coronavirus, I think the US election would dominate talks. When it comes to Brexit, they're in the nitty-gritty now. They're in the pithy bit. Nothing's really changed. I mean, even the news that talks have gone nowhere and therefore we're at an impasse with the EU and it looks like we're going out on WTO is no change from the status quo, and it's not going to get clicks in the same way because which is what it's doing, and everyone's sick to death of it as well. Like, everyone checks on it every once in a while, still the same situation, okay. Like, it doesn't matter if the minutiae have changed a little bit. Most people are bored by the discussion of Brexit, I think. And I know I certainly am, in terms of the broader thing. Until something with some actual substance happens, I'll perk up, right? And I think that's the case for most people. Right, Hagnar said, I'm not saying turn back the clock. Again, going back to, what was it called? The universal suffrage thing. I'm saying stop giving gibs and taxing me for plebs who can't manage $15 an hour and not end up broke. I mean, that's, again, another, like, what to do with the underclass, as it were, is another conversation entirely. Jedi Knight Anakin Cringewalker says, Nigel Farage's political career is the manifestation of the I just wanted to grill meme. And now people are angry he has finally retired to grill. Has he retired, officially? Is that what he said? Let me see what I can pull up. Nigel Farage retires. Let me see. No, the only thing I know is that he announced his retirement in 2016 with the Brexit thing. And he has his EU pensions. But that's all old news. I haven't seen anything from him recently which says that he's not retiring. I mean, retiring from politics is one thing, but he's still doing good work, covering the illegal migrant crossings. Sorry, my voice broke there. Not sure what's going on there. Has anyone been following Nigel Farage recently?
No, I can't say.
Garage. Sorry, where did you take this one?
No, I can't say I've heard anything. So that's really all I've got to say there. No.
There's a new facility where they're keeping. I don't know the specifics of this story, but it's the place where they're going to be keeping lorries while they do the new sort of regulation checks that are going to be required after Brexit. I don't know if it's mythical or real at this point, but they wanted to call it the Farage Garage. All this annoying thing is created because of Brexit, which is all Farage's fault, and it's an opportunity for a rhyme.
1,000-sign petition to name Kent Lorry Brexit. 1,000-sign petition to name Kent Lorry Park after Brexit Party leader. So this is the Evening Standard. Let me just pop this into here and then pop it on the.
Garage was trending on Twitter for a while. That's why I know about it. I don't actually read the paper. You understand? I just look at what's trending on Twitter and click on it if it's got Farage in the name.
Oh, I'm sure. 1,000-sign petition to name Kent Lorry Park after Brexit. More than 4,000 people are calling for the park now to be christened Nigel's Folly. So that's what they're saying.
Right.
I mean, they say thousands of people. It's like, even Kent County Council are not going to be so inflammatory as to call it Nigel's Folly. The new
yes, but it couldn't at all be that there are sort of various little groups, political sort of little political sort of cliques that kind of get together and say, let's get this trending, Not that that's ever happens anywhere. So when you've got people suddenly saying they want it named Nigel's Folly, I mean, doesn't that sound like sort of, I don't know, FBPE Discord?
Oh, 100%. It's a very small group of people, many of whom I suspect won't live in the United Kingdom, and they just put together a petition to have this thing, and it'll go the way of Boaty McBoatface, I suppose, where people might chortle at it. Although it's not going to have the traction that you could just call anything, Ghosty McGhostface, Window McWindowface, Britisher McBritisher face. It's not got the same traction. The petition calls on the local council to name the controversial new facility Nigel's Folly after that. It's fitting that every lorry driver, commuter, local resident has a chance to link this fine example of civil engineering to its true hero. It may be that Mr. Farage will be unable or unwilling to attend the unveiling of this great honour that we do him, but that shouldn't get in the way of seeing his name and huge gurn plastered all over the boundary fence at regular intervals, topped by coils of razor wire festooned with the shreds of black farmers' plastic known as witches' knickers. Okay. They're going to call it a diesel-soaked Valhalla. The amount of sarcasm in this. Again, the left can't meme, so I just don't do it. Don't do it. I don't know why I'm scrolling through these things and the promoted stories on the side. Instead of being politically related, I have 5 secrets wine snobs don't want you to know and the most comfortable pillowcase ever. So that's as well as something Israeli related. So all the joy. Anyway, that's our.
Talking of something Israeli related, on a somewhat lighter note, did anyone see the involuntarily camp display of the Egyptian police force?
Was it just a load of shirtless men on?
Yes, it was. Going by on a kind of specially constructed multi-platform float. And there were all these kind of buff Egyptian police muscle men in, strangely enough, army trousers. But I'm assuming that in Israel, army/police is, the distinction may be a light one. But you watched it and you just went, this is one of the most embarrassingly, involuntarily homoerotic displays of all times.
Topless beefcake police cadets pose in shirtless parade at before the President Sisi to celebrate completing their training. That's what it's called.
It's one of my favorite modern slang terms. I don't think it gets used enough.
Bulk like an Egyptian. So there we go. I'm just reminded. I think I watched South Park where Cartman gets in season 1, where he eats weight gain 4000 and constantly refers to himself as a beefcake, and that's completely ruined the word for me. But yes. Muscled action men stood on tanks, vans, and boats as part of a parade. Bronzed beefcakes showing off their sports skills at the graduation event, with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi among the guests in attendance. So, yeah, it's just it's garish, isn't it?
As I say, when I retweeted that just with the question, where are the village people when you need them?
It's like, oh god, I'm not even going to sing a parody of that song. But yeah, I like that it seems to be purpose-built. When you look at these things, it almost looks like they are little action figures, doesn't it?
Are we not rather backloading the news today? I came on to talk about the cringy 50p coins and the.
I know what you did, but the Egyptian army being action men. What's not to love about that? Okay, let's move to this thing. So before we move on to the cringy coin, because we have still got an hour to play with, there's this thing here. So who is it? Northern Ireland wanted to go into a circuit breaker lockdown. Was that Ireland? Then,
Wales, I heard, was doing it.
No, Wales is going into a fire break lockdown. Whilst Belgium is facing a tsunami of new infections. Like it's like they just have a new descriptor for every time, and it's going to get progressively worse. I can't wait until we have we'll have the glacial melt of new infections. We're going to go into an earthcracker lockdown. We're going to go into a global warming lockdown or something like that, a climate change lockdown. I don't know. It's all
round lockdown.
Sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Like, name it after. We're going into a hurricane lockdown over here, whilst unlike the West Country, which is just going into a mild flood defense lockdown. So it's very strange. I just wanted to marvel at the number of heavily political titles for what is effectively just local lockdown and second wave lockdown, which again, if we're looking at the data, is completely unjustified once again, because cases are on the rise, deaths are not. Cases are on the rise, deaths are not. It's ridiculous.
Not to be too morbid, but do we think maybe the most high-risk people have all died now? And that's not up. Or maybe they just better isolate themselves?
There's definitely an element of the policy has changed. So what happened was, in the initial run-up in the first lockdown, they rushed all of the at-risk COVID-19 patients into care homes, which were primarily old people, obviously. And naturally, a number of them did have COVID-19, and it spread like wildfire throughout that population. To the point of my girlfriend at the time was basically saying it's a bit of a disaster. You're now either working in a specific COVID lockdown, a COVID care home, or you're avoiding them like the plague and hoping that your one doesn't get designated as a COVID care home. Then you have the other option is we didn't have testing. So we have like all of the tests that they claim are positive, most of which were given sort of post-death. And also it's unclear to what degree they were accurate, because they're only 50-50 accurate at this point. I think there's a more accurate one now, which is sort of
50-50. Come on, that must be an exaggeration.
No. It was 50-50, and then the new one is 75 to 80% accurate. And there's like this big thing about a potential new one being developed by Oxford, which is 95% accurate. But genuinely, at the very beginning, it was 50-50. Whether or not it didn't know whether or not it was picking up antibodies, because there was the antibody test. And then there was the COVID test. And the COVID test didn't know if it was picking up antibodies or COVID. And if you had had other diseases, like the flu, for instance, recently, it could give a false positive. And they don't know about how many false negatives there were. But yeah, the stats on it were horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Which is why we had a lot of suspected cases at the beginning. You know what I mean? They always used to talk about suspected cases, and now it's cases because they can be more precise. But, so there's the argument to be made that at the beginning, we massively underestimated the number of cases which were going around, because obviously there were no restrictions, and it had potentially been around since late December in the country. I know I and several of my friends reckon that we have had it sort of early February, late January. So it's because if you remember, we also had all of the pro-Euro, the pro-EU marches, and the obviously Brexit Day marches and stuff like that way back in January. So that would have been a massive vector for transmission if that was to be it. And I got sick fairly soon after that, so it stands to reason it's probably that. But yeah, it's very frustrating. So either cases were registered as far too low, or the lethality of it is just that we're expecting a rise in deaths. That rise hasn't come. We've had a small rise in deaths, but really negligible. And at the moment, we only have, because I think it's remained fairly static. The last time I checked, we had 324 people in hospital, fewer on ventilators. Noting that we have a capacity for 31,500 ventilators, which is obviously huge, plus the Nightingale hospitals, which have now been placed on standby, despite the fact that basically no one's in the hospital still. So, yeah, that's my take on COVID at the moment. Your thoughts?
Like an amusing anecdote to brighten the mood about COVID.
Go for it.
I really don't think she's watching this, but I'm sorry if she is. But my mother-in-law, my dear husband's mother, she downloaded the app, the COVID app on her phone.
Oh, right.
I don't know what it does exactly, but you can use it to, I guess, look at cases in your area, something like that. And she misinterpreted this to think that you use the phone to detect the virus, like it's a tricorder from Star Trek. And she was scanning. She was holding it up to my husband and scanning him. And I thought she was joking at first, like she was doing that, like a joke about the app.
Being a bit silly. But yeah.
She just kept doing it, and she was like, "Oh yeah, it says it's scanning." I guess I don't know what the phone said, but
I bet it does say scanning as well, and it's just.
Yeah, I couldn't laugh at the time. Because you can't just openly laugh at somebody like that, not your mother-in-law. So just kept it in the bank and then laughed about it later. I laugh about it every time I think about it. Every time someone mentions the app, I just.
One of the interesting things, just that I thought that's a very amusing anecdote, but to bring it back down to horrible reality. I looked at, for instance, it's a thing very close to my heart. For instance, is the rate of suicide and self-harm, and it's like domestic violence and self-harm cases in the UK are up something like 65% month on month, which is an obscene number of people. But if you consider that we only had usually we have like something in the region of. Oh, what is it? 40,000 or something like that cases per quarter or something like that. So basically, we have had the same number of people either attempt to kill themselves, harm themselves in some way, or been abused by their partner, as have died from quote unquote the virus in the same period of time. And that's just those causes. That's not including everything else to do with less lethal, I suppose, consequences, which is like the breakdown of relationships, the loss of education for children, the loss of employment for adults, the deaths of small businesses, and all that jazz. So I am finding the entire COVID situation to be completely insane at this point, and I do not know what Rishi Sunak is smoking, despite the fact that he is, according to the polls, the most popular member of the government right now, where God knows why.
Maybe he's just the most visually attractive.
I can't. Yes. Okay, let's move on. Akuda Daimo, I'm sorry I can't pronounce the kanji at the beginning of your name, says, lovely, sitting here with a loaf of homemade bread, 20 bob lemon cake, and a good pot of tea. Now that is a proper tea. I like that. But the question is, what brand of tea is it? That's what I want to know. What tea has he gone for? Shergar says, the NHS is a total shambles, the organisation, not the staff. As a nation, we have been gaslit into simping for it. My German SO is appalled at it. I couldn't agree more. It's appalling. Hagnar says, I dislike Nigel Farage. He does nothing but moan, refuses to take up Labour's spot as a rival power to the Tories and push for change for proper power. Now Boris has become Darth Labour, Lord of the Neolibs and closer of pubs. Yeah, Boris is safe in the sense that there is a worse option than him. Obviously, a little while ago, we did hear Dave Curtin and Lawrence Fox both started what we might term as new UKIP to try and get some traction. I know Lawrence Fox had gained a couple million in support for his party, for instance. Whether or not they can gain any traction and field any candidates is anyone's guess, but it'll take another 10 or 15 years before we know whether or not they're of a suitable size to act as a pressure group as UKIP did. That's the trouble. We're in a kind of lee at the moment, a kind of a lull in the storm, where basically if Labour gets in, it's because they'll say nothing. So Keir Starmer comes across very well to the normies. I hate to say it. He has a lot of skeletons in his closet, and he's got the potential to be sunk if a lot of that stuff comes out, especially due to him running the CPS and grooming gangs. But whilst all that becomes locked away under the Home Office, it's and Priti Patel's watch, it can't be used as leverage against him, and also you would need an investigation into his actions during his tenure as the head of the CPS. That's a Crown Prosecution Service, not Child Protective Services, for those of you wondering. And he basically needs to say nothing, but he's got a good chance of, I think, recapturing a lot of the northern strongholds, provided that he distances himself enough from Corbyn, which I think he's doing to those people following the Labour space. Whereas Boris appears to be sinking by not speaking when he should be speaking, and also by thinking that people care enough about Brexit that as long as Brexit gets done, they'll overlook his handling of the virus, because he's not doing enough to placate the hard lefties who want full lockdown all the time, nationalise all industries to save jobs and that sort of thing. He's not doing. He's doing too much to appease the small C Conservatives, and I just don't see it. But I reckon he will stay in power. Even if this persists for the next 3 years, assuming, of course, that the economy hasn't crashed so much that we're all, eating out of barrels in the street and that sort of thing, gathered around, log fires and lamenting the loss of our nation.
Barrels, that famous source of food. Video games.
I don't know what I'm saying with regards to that. I was thinking apples, barrels full of apples, but basically, he because there is no better option than him at the moment. Unfortunately, he's got the British public, to basically he's the only option. So it's very frustrating. I was going to say he's got us bent over a barrel, but I didn't want to bring more barrels.
Barrels on the brain.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, I must say I was quite won over by Lawrence Fox's various appearances. His interviews he was doing about his new party. I have to admit, I haven't seen him say anything really stupid, and he seems to be quite sensible without any of the kind of baggage that Nigel Farage had.
Well, for the serious politica, the serious body politic, they look at his mandate and his manifesto, effectively, which is very threadbare, and they say, right, well, we're going to have to wait for something to happen there. when it comes to the media, I've seen none of his interviews regarding his new political party. I think I saw 2 articles on it at the time, and then it seems to have dropped off the radar. And if it's anything like the Cuck Party, it might flare up for a little while, but I just don't see it. I don't mean to be a pessimist, but it's just it seems to be repeating the pattern that I saw before. He needs more than just himself. He needs players on side who are going to keep this in the public dialogue and going to keep the interest. I don't think he has that. I don't think he has the charisma for the normies. His frustrations on things like Question Time were noted, but you don't want him to become completely one note. And he needs to be adept at manoeuvring the political landscape. And I don't see it. I don't think he's charismatic enough. And I don't think he's actually knowledgeable enough. And I think most people who are thinking back to remember what it was that he did, remember him from some subpar shows, remember that he released an album lamenting cancel culture, which was really cringe to everyone, especially the normies.
Yeah.
And now he's trying to launch a party with, let's face it, very little funding. I mean, it's $1 million to £2 million, which sounds like a lot of money. But when I was in UKIP and talking to the leadership on that, and they were looking at, for instance, a rebranding campaign and doing the advertising for it, it was going to cost £12 million just for that, and that it was things that they couldn't afford. So things get really expensive. I'm not on Lawrence Fox's payroll. Just to address some of the points you made. Yeah, sure. The interviews I've seen, I think he is quite. You should watch the interviews because I think he comes off quite well. He's not just one note; he has 2 notes. He's anti-cancel culture and he's anti-lockdown, which is actually something I can't think of any mainstream politicians who have been seriously critical of the lockdown. I mean, we've had a few comments from Boris, but I think he's addressing frustrations that many people have that aren't being addressed by any other party. And it used to be the Brexit party, but now that if we get Brexit, they're going to be redundant, and there's going to be refugees from that party who are going to be looking for another party to join. Maybe they'll join the Conservatives. I doubt it. And I think there is a place for a new Brexit party. Oh, so that isn't about Brexit. The question is whether or not Fox is up to the task. I'm not going to completely write him off. I'll watch him for the next 5 years or so and see what he does. But I think if anyone's expecting, some kind of like explosive new kind of popular party to arise with him at the helm, unless he gets some more friends and also has, I suppose, we can go back and forth on the charisma thing. He remains yet to be tested. So I suppose we'll have to wait and watch. Any other comment from...
Just to address your point on funding, in the interview I saw, he claimed that he had one donor who on their own gave 5 million. So your numbers are a bit off there, I think.
Okay, he might have had more that he's received since. Fair enough. No, as I say, I will watch with interest. Any comments from the Britisher or Liz whilst here?
Not really. What? Oh, my only thought, as far as the lockdowns are concerned, I wonder whether that will change, or the positions of the politicians may change after Brexit. I know that I know the positions here on lockdowns are going to change after the election, but given that Brexit is such a comparatively minor issue in the minds of most, do you think that will have any effect on the lockdowns in the UK?
Just phrase the question for me again.
I know one reason we have such hard lockdowns still here in the US is the Democrats just trying to essentially influence the elections or whatever. The UK doesn't have that. So I keep questioning, why are the lockdowns so hard there? And I wonder if they will open up a bit after Brexit, but it doesn't seem like that would play a part. Although it would seem that after Brexit, they're going to have to get the economy going. So it would seem like after Brexit, they're going to want to lift the lockdowns, if for no other reason than to get the economy going. But that wouldn't be influencing them now.
Okay, I've got you. As far as I'm concerned, the Conservatives are terrified of losing the gains that they've made. They have an 80-seat majority, but they're too afraid to use it. And so when it comes to the lockdowns, it's a similar situation. They are, as soon as they start to ease things off and they see those cases go up, they do not want what they see happening in America at the moment. I think the US election is going to be the turning point again to see the way the wind is blowing. So they're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, the Democrats are saying that Trump is a mass murderer who has single-handedly slaughtered 220,000 of his own people. Oh. And if the Democrats win, then they're going to push for harsher lockdowns because they all think that this similar thing is going on over here with regards to a resurgence, and they want to avoid that at all costs. They do not want the same thing, and they'll say, well, Trump was going pretty far as they were concerned and making big moves, and we don't want to be seen to be doing that and to basically fall into the same trap. If Trump wins, they'll have a bit more freedom to be a little bit more, kind of chill about it. But again, I also see the fact that the vast majority of the Conservatives and party members and the politicians are, how you would class, approaching or in the vulnerable age range, and their parents are too. And they also have whipped up the British public into such a state with regards to this that most normies that I know are absolutely terrified, especially if they know someone who's vulnerable or if they're vulnerable themselves. Feel free to jump in at any point here, Poe or Britisher, to relay your own experiences if they're different. But where I see it is that they've gone so far and they can't be seen to back down because they must be seen to be doing something, and easing the lockdown looks like that they're getting complacent.
Yeah, I think you've hit it on it there. I think you shared that that trolley problem meme on Twitter earlier. Just like, politicians, they love to be seen to do something, and so doing nothing just looks incompetent and weak in the absence of all other context. And
so
I think
the meme was the typical trolley problem, and it says the politician will always pull the lever because they can't be seen to be doing nothing.
Exactly. And I think my experience of how seriously the general public is actually taking it is very different. I don't know if it's a difference between London versus outside London, but I think my office is opened back up, so we're not working from home anymore. We're coming into the office with social distancing in place, and most people just don't care at all. Like I can tell they. It's almost like 1984, the way that people will use the hand sanitizer unless they think they can get away with not using it. And we're supposed to be keeping apart and wearing masks if we must stand next to each other, but everyone's just standing next to everyone's desks. We're all just hovering around like we always used to and kind of rolling our eyes at the regulations that they've tried to put in place, and looking over. You meet your sort of fellow conspirators. It's like you know you're safe talking to this guy, but then someone else turns up. You're kind of looking over your shoulder, going like, "Oh, they're going to tell us off for standing too close, or for lingering in the corridor together."
Yeah, it has kind of radicalized people against. There's this kind of atmosphere of fear, not even only about the virus, but what people might think, and also what people might say, especially in a work context. Nobody wants to be let go as a super spreader potential,
It is quite heartening to see people so defiantly flouting the rules, though. It really doesn't take much. It's not like it's not like they're asking for much, and most people just can't be bothered. So it is quite heartening to see people being a little bit rebellious. It makes me think that if it came to a revolution or whatever, that there'd be more people on our side than we might suspect.
Well, to take the optimistic look, I have heard a lot more stuff, certainly from students. Students are really basically on 50-50 now, whereas before they were all kind of in favour of the lockdown. Now I see sort of like a lot of questioning of that, and a lot of normies who say, look, if they're childless, they say, well, it was fun at the beginning, it was kind of like a holiday, and now I'm just sick to death of being stuck at home. And the people with kids who are saying, thank goodness my kids are back in school. But now, effectively, it's basically inevitable that I get infected because kids are, carriers of disease and they're all interacting with one another, even though there's social distancing going on. And there's absolutely no way that they're, not touching their masks. Because if you didn't know, a mask is completely worthless if it's not, one, clean, and two, not touched. If you take it off your face, you're supposed to throw it away. You're not supposed to ever wear them again. So, and the cloth masks do nothing. So, there's no way that the kids are maintaining that kind of level of discipline as well. So, they're kind of exasperated from it because they're like, well, I'm effectively, it's as if I have no restrictions on me. I'm likely to be infected anyway. So, what's the point of this? And I am starting to see a little bit more of that. We have had, certainly in London, a couple of protests now with a couple of, a few thousand. I think the largest one I've seen in person looked like it was about 3,000 or 4,000 people. But I don't know if there's been a larger one recently. I heard murmurings of people getting frustrated, especially with curfews, which have no basis in scientific. There's no reasoning, just crowds, tubes. The 10 p.m. curfew for restaurants and bars. So yeah. That's I suppose the optimistic take on that side of things. Sutsgoen says, being a lazy git, just like your avenging of Mustachio, which is only a third done. 78 seconds and 2 weeks late. I could write any amount of millions of seconds at this point, and you wouldn't even notice the difference, would you? Wink. Thank you, Sutsgoen. Yes. Are you aware that Sutsgoen keeps track of every second that we're late at this point? Yeah.
I get it.
So he's fastidious with it, but at this point he's ridiculous. Eternal Aspiths sent us 20 quid. Thank you very much. It's very generous of you. No message attached. If you did mean to attach a message, feel free to drop one in chat. And George says, future news. Following an avalanche of infections, the UK entered a hokey-cokey lockdown where it remains. Hopefully, hope of a jumble sale of vaccines is strong. Yeah, the amount of buzzwords just drifting around this thing is so funny. I mean, it would be funny if it wasn't just like, I just don't understand how dramatic they have to be. It's like they're like film titles. It's like Circuit Breaker Lockdown. Circuit Breaker Lockdown 2. What was the other one? Fire Break. It's like Lockdown 3. Tsunami.
What are the lockdown movies going to be called?
The lockdown movie. Oh, go on. Well,
actually,
I know
just going straight off topic. I watched The Host recently. It's a horror film of a seance that takes place on a Zoom call. And it was surprisingly not terrible. It was quite good.
Oh dear. I mean, it sounds pretty dire, but I suppose
it sounds bad. Look, I'm on your side. I was skeptical, but it was actually quite well done.
I'm trying to think. I know there's a Netflix series, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically a traditional Netflix thing where it's a sitcom, but it's not a sitcom, and it leans more towards being, kind of. I think it's a British comedy with Simon Pegg, and it's about living in a quarantine, in a lockdown, where they have to wear face masks every day and visit one another from a distance. And so I'm like, well, the media sphere is catching up, but how long before this trope is basically done to death? I am curious how this experience might colour the different types of media. You look at big events in history influencing cinema in particular. So there's things like, Japan created Godzilla, and Godzilla is seen as a kind of a representation of the nuclear threat. There's a lot of Cold War films are filmed in a particular way, where these different things. So I'm curious whether or not the lockdown will have a similar effect on media.
I wrote a novel in lockdown, and just from my own personal experience, I didn't really think about it at the time, but it takes place mostly inside a car, between two characters who are just, the nature of the novel is that they don't like each other, but they've got to share a space, and there is something about being in a car together that now you just don't do it in lockdown. You can't share a car with someone else, and if you do, you have to wear a mask. So it was almost like a yearning for the. It was kind of the opposite thing, where the lockdown made me yearn for the before time when there wasn't a lockdown, and I think that kind of influenced the plot a bit.
Mm. No, I can totally understand that, and I wonder how many
themes of together, the physical closeness and community.
Yes, and I'm wondering how much we'll crave that coming out the other side of this whenever we do. Speaking of, I mean, speak obviously for your own country, Liz, if logically. But when do you see basically things calming down and us coming out of this lockdown? I'll reserve my own opinion until the end.
I think that it's going to be different state by state. I mean, Florida, we've theoretically opened up fully. Businesses are allowed to go back to work. Everything's allowed to go back to normal, and police are not allowed to enforce mask mandates. However, individual counties still have mask mandates and have different things on restaurants and all. And there's a restaurant here in my town that is still fully shut down inside. People can eat outside, but they can't eat inside, even though the restaurant is allowed to open up. It's because the boss doesn't want to, the owner of the restaurant doesn't want to appear to be unsafe. He's not a Trump supporter by any means. So
right.
It's hard to say when it will go back fully to normal, just because it's going to depend on individuals.
I think the news that sorry, Poe, you say first. Your prediction, if you have one.
Yeah, I think. Well, I wonder if it's going to it's going to slowly taper off for the next 4 years, where there's just mask wearing becomes just normal, and people are so used to it that there's always going to be a few people who are still wearing their mask even though they don't have to. And I don't know if handshakes are ever going to come back. So I don't think it's a question of when, but asking what are the things that are going to linger for the next 5 years.
Or
I think it will. On an individual basis, it's definitely going to come back. One of my sisters is having a baby, and we just threw a baby shower here at my place just last week and invited a bunch of people. And some people didn't want to come, and we let people know, hey, this is going to be indoors and nobody's wearing a mask. You can wear a mask if you want, but most everybody else won't be. A lot of people still did come, or young ladies anyway, friends of my family and my sister. And yeah, it was just felt like a normal thing. Nobody was wearing a mask. Everybody still give hugs and sit next to each other and talk to each other and everything.
I remember that.
Yeah, and it was funny to me. I don't leave the house much. So to me, this was normal. It wasn't anything unusual because I just never leave the house anyway. Mm-hmm. But I was surprised 2 or 3 of the ladies there were actually moved by it. When they left, they said, this is amazing. This is the first time I've actually been around people since February. This is the first time I've actually felt normal since February. And to me, that was oh, wow. But again, I'm not normal because I never leave the house anyway.
I look at it now and I go, I think for the vast majority of adults, not much will change. I'm curious what the lasting impact might be on children. Because they'll have developed their own little rituals to kind of get around the lack of handshakes and whatnot. I don't think, for instance, that we're going to be seeing business deals started with, a heel tap or anything like that anytime soon. But I am curious what else might arise. There's also, I look at it and I go, I think this will go on until either... Three scenarios come to mind, right? One is they find a vaccine, which I don't think they'll find. At which point it'll get rolled out en masse, and there'll be there'll be the whole conversation about whether or not that's necessary, or who should take it, or whether or not it should be mandatory, whether or not you're going to have vaccine passports and whatnot. That's one option. I think it's the least likely because we have never developed a vaccine for a coronavirus. The other option is it becomes clear that a vaccine is not tenable, and that lockdown has been going on for much, much longer, and the economy is tanking, and people just can't take it anymore. That's another option. Again, I still think we're a ways off that. I think Christmas will be an interesting marker, but I could see this going until April, certainly, like the end of this academic year, at which point they'll be looking at whether or not they want to continue the measures through into the next academic year. There's going to be discussion about students, certainly about what they're going to pay, because the vast majority of people will be, I'll be looking at admissions and going, that's really expensive for an all-online course, right? When the Open University, for instance, offers things a lot cheaper. Although I don't think, Oxbridge, Cambridge, that sort of thing, are going to be unsubscribed, right? I think it's going to be all of the other universities, the middling universities in particular, and the lower tier ones, which are going to suffer from that, rightfully or wrongfully so. And then the third option is, where's it gone off the top of my head? First option, we find a vaccine. Second option, the whole thing becomes completely untenable. And the third option, which is that it becomes sort of a new normal and business adjusts and that we all end up basically working from home, and it becomes a new kind of dystopia in that sense where people are afraid to go out. I also think that one's fairly unlikely. But again,
I can't see that happening.
I see it sort of persisting until April, May, perhaps even into June time next year. That's what I see. I don't see it slowing down at any point at the moment. Of course, that's open to change depending on what the economy looks like. But for the average voter, they're not looking at the Financial Times and going, "Oh, this is the worst recession than 2009." They're not clocking that. They won't see it until their housing prices start to be affected, because that's the biggest indicator of how the wealth of the nation is going. If those start going either massively up through the roof or massively down, that's going to be a really interesting, interesting from an academic sense, and quite a scary one from others, time to be alive in the country. So that's the sort of thing which will generate, I suppose, a political impetus for people to pay attention and to do something about it, because it's hitting them in the pocket.
This dystopia you describe, I was just going to mention there's an Isaac Asimov book called The Naked Sun that describes a whole civilization of people who never see each other. Yes. They only speak on Skype. It's a very good novel.
Yeah, good book. Any final comments on that before we move on? Okay. Mr. Will Guitar says, has anyone used house arrest to develop new habits or enjoy themselves in any way? Britisher completed Magnum PI and moved to Incredible Hulk. Britisher? Or is he fully AFK at this point? He may have stepped away.
Dead.
I think unfortunately, he might have fallen asleep at the computer. His neck was giving out there, so...
no, it's that I was on mute.
Oh, I see, okay.
I was just responding to Mr. Will Guitar, only to realise that you were continuing to talk, and I just didn't know why I couldn't be heard.
That's your own fault, then.
But yes, I must say that this is where I draw the line, Mr. Will Guitar. I am perfectly willing for you to slander me as the world's greatest Magnum PI fan. But when it comes to your entering my interest into comic book superhero territory, that's where I just go, no. Incredible Hulk, there I will not go.
Don't make him angry. That's what I'm saying. I regret that joke immediately. The Civic Nationalist says, I ride a motorcycle, drink and smoke. Statistically, I am more likely to die from riding than COVID. And I think this is a calculation, I suppose, that a lot of people are now beginning to make, now that the observed data is coming through. Not that people are paying masses of attention to the data itself, they're just hearing rising cases and equating that with higher risk of death. But I don't know how many, idle hands and all that, so I suspect that more people will pay attention the more bored they get, but it's a question of whether or not they get bored. Any comments on that?
You see somebody shared a series of graphs on Twitter with which showed that indoor accidents were almost as dangerous in terms of deaths as COVID.
Yeah.
Same period of time, but staying indoors almost as dangerous as COVID was the tweet accompanying it.
Oh dear.
People doing DIY and all that.
Yeah. Anakin Cringe Walker says Trump has confirmed he'll run in 2024 if he loses. How does it feel knowing we will probably still be talking about Trump's second term 8 years from now?
He's gonna win.
It wouldn't be 8 years anyway.
No, 4 years.
It would be 4 years.
Well, I just have my doubts, Poe, that he's going to win.
Yeah, we'll see.
Let us know. Give opinion.
Put it like this: I would gladly be wrong. I would prefer him to win, but I just still say that the sort of convenient dismissal of all the polls and pointing to large gatherings and whatever, which was the case last time round. Hillary Clinton didn't have large gatherings; he did, and she nonetheless won the popular vote. Now, I know immediately people, going all pedantic, oh, it's not the popular vote. Well, yes, but usually it tends to go with the popular vote. So if we go anywhere near along the lines of where the polls are suggesting, and remember last time round the poll suggested she had a lead, and it turned out eventually she did have a lead in the popular vote. So if they are this time round anywhere near right, it's going to be a bloodbath. So the simple question is, are they really all committing absolute suicide in being not only wrong again, but more wrong than any pollsters have ever been, just in order to try and influence something? Or is there maybe some truth to this?
I think they're actually deranged. They're not lying. That it's not like a gamble. They just I think they're just wrong, incorrect.
I'm just struggling to see that all the pollsters across the board would be this deranged. This is, as I say, I want the guy to win, but I'm looking at it and I'm just not sure to what extent it is that we're all telling ourselves that we want him to win long enough until we just begin to believe he will win.
Well, I'd rather not debate you. I think I'd rather just wait and we'll see who's right.
I think one thing that needs to be considered in looking at the polls is also the other poll more recently that came out saying Trump voters are more likely to lie on polls than Biden supporters. People on the right are just not comfortable admitting that they're voting for Trump. The majority of them are, but a significant percentage are not.
Yes, I mean, this is what they call the shy conservative over here, which tends to just gets factored into polling. So I'm again. Sorry.
No, go on.
No, I am just very skeptical at the idea that this all must be wrong at a colossal level. And also the fact that it just doesn't seem to really be moving. That's perhaps the most worrying of all. I mean, even if the difference were smaller, the fact that there doesn't seem to be much momentum on the Trump side, in which kind of would give an indication that he's closing the gap. So you're looking at this going, the closer we get to election day, the more uncomfortable I'm feeling about this whole thing. Because to me, it just does seem as if we're kind of counting down the clock, and he just doesn't seem to be closing the gap.
I suppose the only thing I look at all. I know it's superficial, but I look at the engagement that the Democratic Party gets online, and I look at the engagement that they get at their rallies, and I appreciate that the vast majority of the Democrats are far more willing to stay at home and say, well, we'll tune in from afar. I look at the fact that in, for instance, the first Trump-Biden debate, which I thought was fairly even-handed at the end of it as a Brit looking in. I thought neither side really dominated the other. And I see that and I look at it and I go, well, according to CNN of all people, Trump won that sort of 60-40. Then I'm going, or, whatever it was, 66-34. And I go, that screams to me that I feel like the Trump side is just massively undersold at this point, rather than the Biden one being a kind of sleeping giant that is only emerging to apparently vote in the polls. I don't see it. I can't. I will be incredibly surprised if it's a close run, and I'll be incredibly surprised if Trump doesn't win.
So to you, it's not only going to be a Trump victory, but it's going to be a kind of, really solid Trump.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a landslide, but I think it's going to be a solid win.
I tried to go out of my way there to not say landslide.
Yeah,
I guess you noticed.
Yeah.
My prediction, before the whole COVID thing, was Trump is going to win it, and he's going to win it comfortably. I mean, it's you can't beat someone who is sitting on such a strong economy. But then, of course, along came COVID. The economy tanked. Lots of people lost their jobs.
Well, the only question is whether or not they attribute that to Trump.
I know. But
one of the big questions. Sorry,
it's not one. It's not a way to win. A great deal of extra support, is it?
And one of the big questions which has come up is because the Democrats have been throwing mass murderer at him, for instance, a lot. And the real question was, how many were supposed to die if he did everything perfectly? And the Republicans are now coming out and using the fact that the best case scenario from the World Health Organization and the UN was 200,000 deaths. And he's pretty much bang on that. So, I don't think COVID and the economy have dealt him the blow that you think potentially he might have had blown.
Well, I just don't think that bad news of whatever kind, and whomsoever's fault it is, I don't think if you're the incumbent that you ever benefit from bad news. And whether unfairly or not, I think you lose a lot of support. And if people are out of work, they take it out on the government, whether it's the government's fault or not.
Any opinion from our correspondent across the pond?
I think that the lockdowns are going to play a big part. And right now, the Democratic Party is the party of the lockdowns. Biden has said he will lock down the whole country if he wins. And Trump has said, no, open it back up. So, yes, I think COVID is playing a part, but I think that it could actually be a bigger boon to Trump at this point, because Trump is the one saying, let's get everything open back up. Let's get back to work. Let's get the economy going. And the Democrats are saying, no, shut it down harder. Fire everybody again. Everybody that has gone back to work, we're going to send you back home again. We're going to close all the schools and everything. So while, yes, if it weren't for that, I would say that the whole COVID thing would be bad for Trump. But given the way both parties are reacting to it, I actually think this is better for Trump.
I think pretty much anything COVID related damages Trump. I think if he could have managed to focus public attention more. It's not a matter that he didn't focus. It's a matter that he somehow didn't manage to sort of move the narrative that way. If he could have moved it more towards the kind of lawlessness and chaos and Antifa and things like that, law and order, policing, I think that's his strong point. That's where he in a way wins in public opinion. When it comes to COVID, I think it moves away from him. And I think COVID has become the story of this election, and that's why I think it damages him a lot.
The problem with the law and order thing, and I agree with you there that is one area where it would be better for him but the fact is he's not shutting down the riots. And the reason for that is he can't. But that's not going to change if he wins. So going after him saying, oh, we need law and order, we need law and order. Well, he's not stopping the riots because he can't.
No, I fully understand, but this is what I mean. It depends on where your narrative is. It's the same thing as if you sort of say, well, when it comes to local regulations regarding COVID, it's not him, it's local governors and so on. But the question is, where does the narrative in a way come to rest? What is it that kind of grabs public attention? And I think the Democrats have successfully managed to grab the attention with their COVID narrative. And it doesn't really matter so much of whether you agree with it or not, as to whether you think it's actually having an impact, whether it's doing damage, so to speak. And that's where I just think, to me, it looks as if they have run with this. They have focused group this to death. They realize that it's gaining them ground. And that's why I think, people like Biden or whatever are going out of their way to kind of, for every second that they possibly can, to wear a mask and to sort of appear super duper cautious. I think that's entirely calculated.
I agree. I think they're doing it on purpose, but I think it's backfiring on them. Because again, they are now the party of lockdown. And I think that early on, it worked to make the narrative COVID. But at this point, people are tired of it. People are not dying from COVID anymore. The death rate has just dramatically dropped. People are still getting sick, but they're not even going to hospital. So saying, oh, the cases are way up. And then people look around and say, yeah, but nobody's sick. Nobody's going to hospital. I think that it is now backfiring on the Democrats to where now people are saying, we want to get back to work. Kids want to go back to school. We want to be able to visit our relatives. We want to be able to see our families. We want to be able to just get back to regular life. And the Democrats are saying, lock it down, lock it down, lock it down. And Trump is saying, I want to give you your life back. So I think that the COVID argument was good earlier, like months ago. But at this point, I think it's going to be backfiring on them.
Well, I mean, let's hope you're right. But yeah, I'm just very doubtful. I'm getting quite a grim feeling here.
It's hard to say. I still don't know what's going to happen. I lean more toward Trump is going to win. I don't know that it's going to be a landslide. I think it could very easily be just a massive landslide. That is very possible. I'm not saying that's likely. I don't know what's going to happen. I personally, just my opinion leans toward it's going to be like the last election. He will win. It's just not going to be an overwhelming victory. But I could be wrong.
Maybe I'm taking this too simply, but my line of reasoning was just that we won last time. Using that as a firm data point that we all agree on, the only thing you have to assess now is it more or less likely? Does it look more or less likely than it did this time 4 years ago? And to me, its chances look a lot better than they did 4 years ago. I think Biden is an even weaker candidate than Clinton for different reasons.
Well, that's where I disagree. I think Biden is a stronger candidate than Clinton.
Right.
I would agree with you there.
It's not that I think that Biden is. I mean, Biden is pretty much. I described him once in one of the week that was things as kind of Magnolia. That he just blends into the background. He's not at all a strong personality. It's a strong personality that kind of grabs the whole thing. But Clinton was utterly despised, and Biden isn't, and that already has him up on Clinton.
We have an interjection from another American. If you are curious, the Harry Channel has said, there are many shy voters. Look at the drop in Trump's donations. It's not due to a drop in enthusiasm. People are now being cancelled based on their political donations. Are they enough to counter 5 years of news and new media manipulation? Or news media manipulation? Nobody knows. Also, hi, Liz.
Hello, Harry.
So that's another thing to take into account, I suppose. I know that Biden appears to have outspent Trump by almost twice as much. Although, as I understand it, money isn't.
Well, didn't Clinton already outspend Trump?
Well, I was going to say, as I understand it, money isn't playing as much of a factor. You still need a lot of it to compete.
Well, it's because Trump gets a huge amount of media attention just for being Trump. That's what he already managed last time round. That the media constantly keep reporting on him. he's constantly kept within the public's eye, and therefore doesn't need to do a lot of advertising to keep himself there. Because the news is pretty much 24/7, always telling you about the latest thing Mr. Trump has said. So, in that regard, I don't think the advertising money necessarily makes that much of a difference. But I think, first off, we're coming from a different starting point. So last time round, strange as it sounds, I mean, I honestly never thought that I would be saying this, but last time round was not as polarized as it is now. So even though you had two candidates that hated each other, and again you had very sort of polarized camps, you still had a sort of large, large as in large for the usual showing in elections of, wasn't it the Greens that polled quite a bit?
Mm.
I mean, all that in this polarized situation is just going to fall to zero. It is, and one just has to say those votes are more likely going to go Democrat than they are going to go Republican. And that already, given that last time round it was so tight, if you sort of take that as the starting point, and then you add COVID, and then you add the job losses, and you look at it and you just go, the one thing that Trump has got going for him are the utter histrionics on the left, where they just seem to be behaving shambolically, and the rioting in the streets and whatever. It doesn't help. It may help to kind of strongly focus the kind of hardened camp. But when it comes to the sort of the middle ground voters, the ones you're actually trying to sway, it doesn't at all. So that's where Trump benefits. But I'm just looking at it, I'm sort of going, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, last time around, for example, I believe also the black vote was very low. And this time around, the black vote, I mean, Black Lives Matter, this whole polarizing thing that's been going on now for years, you can see the black vote turning out quite strongly. And one knows that Biden plays very, very well with the black camp. So,
did you see what happened recently with, I think it's Ice Cube?
Diddy, wasn't it? P. Diddy?
Maybe. Oh dear, I can't remember which one.
Like
but the one
Black
that actually...
Party? Are you thinking Our Black
No.
Party? Okay, that's okay. What did Ice Cube do?
If I've got the right person,
Mm-hmm.
He put out a big thing, I don't know what you call it, a treatise, a manifesto or something, talking about how the U.S. needs to fix its relationship with black people. Okay, Chad is saying it was Ice Cube. I thought it was. Anyway, and he presented it to both parties, and the Democrats said, well, we'll look at that after the election. And Trump said, here, let's look at it. Or Trump's party looked at it and said, okay, and actually changed some of the pieces of their platform, saying, we'll work with you. And Ice Cube came out and said, whoa, I was surprised. Trump actually listened, and the Democrats wouldn't even listen. He was not saying he was supporting Trump, but immediately all the Democrats attacked him. Oh, he's supporting Trump now. He's supporting Trump. And so things like this, I think, are going to drive a lot more black voters to Trump, because you're seeing the Democrats attacking them for even talking to the Republicans about how to make things better.
No, I can see that sort of, individual situations like that can sway some of the thing, but as a big bloc, we know they are heavily Democrat. And
they are, but they also,
last time round, I think it was pretty much a historically low turnout for the black vote. Again, if you you look at the green thing, then you look at the black vote, more than likely being larger this time round. And then, as I say, I think the COVID plays against him. To me, it's looking grim.
I'm gonna have to,
and I think particularly the fact when then half the White House got COVID, I think that was that was a particularly bad blow to them.
I'm going to have to make this
exaggeration.
I'm going to have to make this your final statement. If both of you could make a kind of a closing statement on this particular issue, as we round the stream out.
I'm quite happy to leave the last word to Liz, and I've said my bit.
Very well, very well. Any last things to add, Liz?
No, I think I've said everything. Also,
marvelous. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming to the end of the show. It is time to end. But it's been an absolute pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure being back in the hot seat, back running another Fake Accents Unite. I'm sorry we missed the one last week. But we will be back next time. In fact, I have a stream lined up on the 25th with Don the Pleb, where we're going to be discussing the American election and more. And that sort of thing. I've been asked to shill for the sake of a chap in my Discord, a great guy called Teabag. If you like true crime breakdown, sort of in the realm of a more British donut eater and that sort of thing, the Teabag Who Laughs has done a set of streams. If you search TTBWL on YouTube, you should be able to find his videos on the Philpott family and the Planfield Butcher. Also, anything to shill from yourself, Poe?
I made a video that was released tonight. It was just a couple of hours ago, so go watch that if you're interested in hearing my take on the Emperor's new clothes, intelligence signaling, and Donald Trump's intelligence.
If you want to hear about Poe wax lyrical about Donald Trump's intelligence, look up Poe the person on YouTube. Britisher, anything to shill?
Nothing immediately that I've just brought out, other than the week that was yesterday, but nothing that's sort of beyond the regular.
If you haven't watched the week that was, go check that out on the Britishers channel.
Liz, it's good.
Liz, is there anything that you would like to that you've made recently, or are you coming back to the scene?
No,
unfortunately not.
I want to, but no, not right now. Sorry.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. That Indian dude has come in with a last-minute super chat with 10 Aussie dollars. Thank you so much. It says, "I know I'm going to get dunked on for this, but Trump is about to be handed a beating. We can all say COVID is fake, but Trump finally met an enemy that he cannot bully." I don't know. I don't think COVID is fake. I don't think that the people suffering the effects of COVID are fake. It's all about scale, my man. So it's about how much that COVID hurts, how much the measures to quote protect us against COVID hurt, and what the fallout is from that in terms of both public opinion, attitudes to pandemics, pandemic planning in future, and global considerations in terms of international trade and relations and whatnot and all that stuff. Immensely complicated topic, but I think that Trump will come out of this stronger, assuming he doesn't succumb, which he doesn't seem to have done. So there's that. But I'll say no more. That's basically the plan for the week. Apart from this channel naturally becoming a Minecraft Let's Play, some of you will have noticed that the channel icon has changed in the last couple of weeks to a horrendous Weebery thing. This is because I lost a bet a year and a half ago and I have to fulfill my obligations, so that'll be around till tomorrow, at which point it will change. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you very much to my panel for being here. And
thanks a lot.
And we'll see you next time. We'll see you next week. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.
Toodle-pip.
Bye.
Bye.